Who doesn't love to party with a purpose? Raise a glass for a good cause. We're in the era of conscious drinking. It goes beyond premium spirits and the smoothest palate. People care about the integrity of the ingredients in the spirit, how it was processed, if it was ethically produced, the story behind it, and if it has a great mission associated with positive social and economic impact. It's a winner in my book. If you like those vibes, then you'll definitely love Du Nord's social spirits as much as I do. Du Nord is a micro distillery based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Fun fact, they're the first Black-owned distillery in the country. They believe you can do good while drinking better. And you know what? I do too. Through the Du Nord Foundation, they are diversifying the industry. They're providing resources and support for business owners, and they're investing into underprivileged communities and overlooked minorities. They're doing a lot of amazing things in Minnesota and beyond. I am so honored for the opportunity to chat with Chris Montana, co-founder of Du Nord Social Spirit. You are in for a treat. Let's get into it. Chris Montana, welcome to Atlanta. Welcome back to Atlanta.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Of course. So, what brings you to Atlanta this time, and what's your goal exactly for this trip?
Well, a couple different things, but as always, the theme is always we're just trying to reconnect. And as a small brand, I think it's important for me to get out and actually meet people.
Yeah.
Because this is how small brands can grow. It's through relationships, and if a bar is going to take a chance on us, on our little team, then I want to come out and thank them and just let them know how much it matters to us. Well,
I'm happy that you're visiting and happy that you stopped by Spirit and Soul Studio to come hang out with us. Honestly, it's an honor for you to be here. I'm so grateful that you came. So thank you for adding us. And Kalia, shout out to Kalia for adding us to the agenda.
Kalia, who's just off camera,
yes.
Banana. Right? But this is great. I absolutely love this. Normally when I do a podcast, I don't get a drink beforehand and like everything.
Really?
Like
I don't think it should be any other way.
Yeah,
Welcome to Spirit and Soul.
I tend to agree. Right? but you're an outlier, right?
Yeah.
You're blazing a new trail.
Yep. Okay. Next question. So let's discuss what it means to be, or what it meant to be the first Black-owned distillery. So back when you first discovered that you were the first Black-owned distillery, what year was that?
I don't think I actually knew that until...
Or an era. What?
It wasn't when I started.
Okay.
I didn't know when I started. And
it's like a few years in,
and
maybe.
I definitely didn't care either.
I know.
It was,
we're going to get there.
But no, I think I probably found that out somewhere around like 2015 or so.
Okay.
Right? So I'd already been at it for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And I think what started making me ask the question was I went to ACSA, which is the American Craft Spirits Association. That's the nonprofit that represents the craft distillers. And I went to their convention in Chicago. And I was the black guy there, 1,000 people in the room. And I had asked the president then, this guy named Paul, he's a friend of mine, right? And I said, hey, does it ever stand out to you that there aren't that many people of color here? And I love Paul, and one of the reasons why I love him is because he's real. And he just looked at me and he was like, no. Right? And the thing is, that's the right answer, right? Because that's he could have blown, he could have BS'd me or whatever, but he just gave me the true answer. He never really thought about it. But I, of course, did. Because I stood out. Everybody knew anybody who met me, they're like, oh yeah, you're the guy. And people remembered me. And I was like, you don't remember me because of the spirits that you've had of mine or anything like that. You remember me because I was the one black guy in the room.
Yeah.
So that's when I started getting a hint that maybe there weren't that many black distillers out there.
So that was 2015. So I guess I want to understand what it meant to be the first Black-owned distillery back then when you first discovered, and how it feels to share that space with a few more really great brands now. So there's so much room for growth in this area, of course. But I know being recognized as a black distiller, like you said, or the first black distillery wasn't always the messaging that you liked to lead with. Can you explain why and how your views on that evolved over the years?
Yes. So when I started the distillery, one of the, wasn't necessarily the prime reason, but one of the things I really enjoyed about it is that I was making a product that would sit on the shelf and it would not have my color behind it. So I grew up in Minnesota, and I was born in Indiana and grew up mostly in Minnesota. And I was black before everything I did. And often told whether or not I was being black enough, or whether or not I was this or that. And it always, everything seemed to come back. I went and got a law degree, but I couldn't be a lawyer. I was the black lawyer. And I didn't want to be the black lawyer. I just wanted to be Chris, right? And so I wanted to be judged on the basis of the work that I put out. And that was evasive for me. And so when I started the distillery, and many people had no idea that Denord was black owned for years, right? Because we didn't talk about it. It just wasn't, I wanted to be judged. I wanted to put a product on the shelf that people would buy because it was good. Full stop. And to add in, now later, right, and post Super Bowl, we had a lot of press come in and they're like, oh, this is a black-owned distillery. We didn't even know. And one of the reasons why I moved to the point where now we talk about it, and as you could probably tell, it's still not something that I'm all that comfortable with.
Yeah.
But I moved to that place because one of the things I wanted to do, once I realized, right, once I was at that convention, I saw there weren't any other black people there, I said, okay, well then there's a duty then to do something about that. And so how can we diversify the industry? And my take on that was, I'm going to hire the people who are not in this industry, right? I'm going to hire the women and I'm going to hire the people of color. And, or at least I'm going to make the opportunity for them. If they're not the best person for the job, then I'm not going to hire them, but I'm going to go out and look for them. And then I'm going to teach them what I know how to do. And then they will go off and they will become my competitors. That was the way I thought I was going to revolutionize the industry. Problem is, I'm sitting in Minneapolis, and that kind of impact, best case scenario, maybe a couple people go off. People have a tendency to join Denord and not leave. And so that was never actually gonna work, right, as far as diversifying the industry. But I had, and this is probably a longer answer than you wanted.
No, it's good. I
had an interaction with a gentleman or a brand that you may know, and it was after I had decided that I wanted to run for and become the president of the American Craft Spirits Association, because I was like, I can do a lot of this from the top, right? But this isn't organically going to happen because there isn't anybody else there. So there's a guy who has his family has a distillery, Delta Dirt.
Okay.
Right. And he saw me up on stage. Now I didn't know this at the time, but he saw me up on stage and his mother was there too. They've got a farm in Arkansas. They make a number of products. Great family, great company. And they were deciding whether or not they were going to start up a distillery. And he was in. He thought it was a great idea. Mom wasn't sold yet. And if mom's not in, the family's not in. And it was seeing me up on that stage. You saw a black man in this sea that did not look like me or them. And they saw me up on the stage and said, maybe that will actually, maybe we can do this too. Now, he didn't tell me that. I actually found this out just a few years ago. They've been up and running for a long time. And he just stopped me and said, hey, by the way, and he told me this story. And I was like, are you kidding me? That gets me in my core.
That's giving me chills sitting right here.
So there's a company out there making these spirits, and in part, right, it's because of the work that they did. I have no ownership over that, right? Obviously, that's their story and their successes. But to think that just knowing that there was someone who did this before, who looked like them, and whether you want to call it success or at least I was there, right? That was the kind of impact that I really wanted to have. There's a company out there that is more likely to have been started because they knew that I was there. So if I really wanted to affect the industry, I had to get over my own hang-ups first and be willing to have what was for me an uncomfortable conversation and saying, yeah, I am a black man who owns a distillery, and there aren't many of us, but it can be done. And so if anything else, if you can see me and say, if that guy can do it, because anybody who meets me knows I'm actually a pretty simple dude, right? So if that guy can do it, then I can too.
That's very inspiring. Was that a speech you've given before?
I've been asked that question.
Because it's like,
many
dude,
times,
like that's so motivational. Like I have chills. Like that story, that's your real life. This is your real life. This isn't made up. That's what's so cool about it.
Well, to me, what continues to be wild about that is the gentleman's name's Harvey. It was a passing comment that he made to me. Like, we're years after this happened. Delta Dirt's been open, and anytime, and again, particularly with other people who are trying to open up distilleries, they can always call me, right? It's the first thing I do. Like, here's my cell phone. Call me, because there are pitfalls out there, and I know what it's like to start behind the 8 ball where you can make no mistakes. Mm-hmm. So don't do that. Learn from my mistakes. I've already paid the iron price. Mm-hmm. So I had already talked to him about some different things here and there. We had this report. He had never told this to me before. And then one day he just drops it on me. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. I was like, this is, he literally made the argument that everyone had been making to me. It said, well, it matters for people to see a path. And if you don't see anyone who looks like you, then you don't see yourself in that position. Mm-hmm. And I would always hear that and say, well, yeah, but not me. Mm-hmm. I don't really like to be the one who's out in front like that. And so I'm happy to put somebody else in that role, but I don't want to be that because I don't want to do that kind of work. But then to have him take that argument and make it real and just in passing drop that little bombshell in my lap, I was like, yeah, we need to be more upfront.
Yeah, representation matters. And that story is just an example of alignment and like, I'm a spiritual person, so I'm just like, that's God. That's beautiful. That's amazing. It wasn't an accident. Yeah. Okay, so you and Chanel, you're not just business owners, you're very active members of your community. So back in 2020, when the George Floyd murder happened and there was a lot of social unrest going on in Minneapolis, the distillery, which was just a few blocks away, was very close to the crime scene, along with other businesses, and you guys were impacted and experienced some devastation. That was a very pivotal moment for Du Nord. And your response to that, again, was so admirable. Can you share how the mission of Du Nord changed around this time?
You know, it's interesting you word it that way because I might answer it slightly differently.
That's okay.
Because I don't know that the mission of Du Nord actually changed. Okay. I think that the situation changed around Du Nord. Okay. I've always looked at business as, I grew up in a left-leaning city with people. It was always kind of in the ether that businesses were bad, right? And nobody said that to me. I was never handed a pamphlet, but you just kind of understood that. Businesses were owned by bad people who just wanted money and they exploited people and this, that, and the other. And anytime you hear a one-sided story, it's usually not entirely true. So I always thought that there was a place for business, that business could actually be a source of good. To me, the path to that was if your business is like a good neighbor, then that business is probably doing good within the community, right? Mm-hmm. So we were in 2020 a completely different company than we had been in 2019. With the pandemic, by the time George Floyd was murdered, we had stopped making spirits. We were making hand sanitizer and giving it to first responders. Wow. So we were in a completely different space. And so we had already shifted our whole product because people didn't need, as much as I loved our vodka and everything else we were making, people didn't need vodka. We had people who were afraid they were going to die. We had people who couldn't go outside. We had first responders who needed to go out and work with people anyway. And so we shifted our entire production over to making hand sanitizer, which, we, for years, actually, supported the, ironically, considering it's what happened later in 2020, the first hand sanitizer that we produced and gave out went to police departments. But we supported the child care centers for like 2 years with their hand sanitizer needs, right? Pro bono. But so our business had already shifted, and that shift towards hand sanitizer was the same shift that led us to our actions after George Floyd, because the whole ethos is you do whatever's next. You do what the community needs. So when we only existed because people would pass up 6, 7, 8 bars that had more interesting offerings to come and be with us, right? So the community supported us. That's how we stayed afloat. We're this tiny, tiny little shop. It's me in there grinding corn trying to make this work. So when the community was down, then we're like, all right, well, this is our opportunity. We have a warehouse, we have a forklift. There are things that we can do that other people can't do. So how can we leverage this distillery that we have to be of use? Which was the same question that we asked ourselves at the beginning of the pandemic, is how can we leverage this distillery that we have to be of some use? So what we ended up doing is the distillery itself was set on fire, which was unfortunate. And there's more to that. That's the shortest I've ever told that story.
Okay.
But so if you're curious, I can expand on that. But that was on a Thursday night, right? So it was set on fire Thursday night. I knew at 2 a.m. Friday morning that it was on fire. But there was a curfew, and so large black man, I was not going to walk out and catch a bullet because at this point we've got National Guard going around with guns pointing at people, and so I couldn't go until 6 a.m. the next day. So that day, I showed up and the place is still smoking. There's still fires in there. And so I'm walking into this baby of mine that I put everything into, and it's on fire. And, I'll fast forward through some of it. I'm putting out some of the fires and whatnot. And I had some friends come by and cried like an absolute baby. And because I don't know that I could find the words to actually explain what it was like. Because at the time, if I'm honest, I felt a little betrayed. I felt like we were trying to be the best version of ourselves. When George Floyd was murdered, like, we were out in the streets. We were at the first protest. We were giving out hand sanitizer and water for free. We did everything that we could, and I felt a little betrayed. I was like, how could this community come back and set fire to my business? Well, later I would find out, first of all, it wasn't my community who came up and set fire to my business, right? But that day, the community showed up. It came from all over the place. And when word spread that Denord had been hit, because we were in the epicenter of everything that anybody saw on TV, we were on that same block. So when word spread, they showed up from everywhere. And they came with snow shovels, they came with whatever they had to try to help us clean up. So I've now got all these people, everybody you could think of, black, white, everybody, coming out saying, we're here to help you. How can we help you? Right?
I want to cry.
That was the community actually showing up for us.
Yeah.
And we had that place cleaned up. We turned it into a food and supply bank, and we ended up running that food and supply bank for 2 years.
Oh,
right?
wow.
It was supposed to be just a quick, emergency situation. But we had lines of people. I mean, we were doing a distribution. We were feeding 400 families a day. We had people lining up hours and hours before we opened. Women out there with kids in that line, right? Just waiting to get basic supplies, because the whole area, the Target was burned out. The grocery stores were burned out. If you didn't have a car, if you couldn't get out to the suburbs, where are you going to get any, diapers?
Yeah.
Where are you going to get any of this stuff?
Yeah.
And so that was what the community needed next. They didn't need vodka.
Yeah.
Right.
So it was a response to what was needed, like you were saying.
Yeah.
A response to what your
You do
community
what's
needed.
next.
Wow. Chills. Okay. Next question. Tell us more, since we're kind of gearing to that anyways. Tell us more about the Denord Foundation and its mission and some of the projects you guys are working on now.
Yes. So speaking of the that time just after George Floyd was murdered, we had insurance. We would find out that we weren't insured enough, but we had insurance. A lot of businesses didn't. A lot of people lost everything. And what a lot of people don't know about that unrest is that the businesses that were burned, that corridor, when I was a kid, that was a blighted area. It had been taken over and revitalized by communities of color. So the businesses that we lost in all of the burning and all of that, those were the businesses that were owned by people of color. And so it was an absolute shame from my perspective, but also knowing that people just lost. I know how hard it is to start one of these businesses and to watch these people lose. Well, we were getting press, right? We had all the TV cameras and everyone coming out and talking to us, and we had all these people wanting to support us. So GoFundMe started popping up. And I knew full well, I was like, well, we do have insurance. And these GoFundMes are going to turn into a situation where we're going to get money that we don't necessarily need. But we knew full well that there were all these other places. There was there was a pharmacy, the only pharmacy that was run by people from the Somali community. The Somali community is very large in the city. It's like, well, they were getting no press. Nobody was filling up their GoFundMe, but we were getting one.
Yeah.
So we said, all right, let's start this GoFundMe and let's try to raise a little bit of money, and we'll use that money to give it away to these other businesses. And we said it at the time because my apartment was set on fire too. So I was staying out of a
my God.
the day after the distillery was set on fire, my apartment was set on fire. But I was staying in a.
Was this? You said you could expand a little bit more on this. Do you care too? Because I'm like, I need to know. Were you targeted? Like,
no, I wasn't targeted. I wasn't
Okay.
targeted. It's just my apartment. So distillery was burned one day. My apartment was on Lake Street, and a lot of this was happening up and down Lake Street.
Yeah,
so when the distillery was set on fire, then the next night when I went home. I hadn't slept. Nobody who lived in that area of the city really slept for the entire week because you couldn't. It was crazy. It was like living in a war zone. But I took a whole bunch of Benadryl because I was like, I need to sleep because it's starting to get weird. And 2 o'clock in the morning, I got woken up, and because my alarm was going off and places got smoke in it, and I went to the window and I looked out on the window, and there's people. The building across from me had been set on fire every single night. Right, and the fire department come put it out, and it gets set on fire the next day. So everything you're living in an area where almost all the buildings around me have been set on fire, right? But mine hadn't, and I really didn't have time. I mean, where else am I going to go, right? So I was in my apartment, and I opened the door, the window, which faces Lake Street. And when I opened the window, people on the street realized that there was someone still in the building, and I could see their terror. They were freaked out. And all these people just start waving. It's soundproof glass. So I can't hear any of this. But they're just waving frantically saying, get out, get out, get out. And I got the hint. And so I got out. The first floor of the building was fully on fire. Right? But I got out perfectly fine. So I wasn't,
thank God.
I'm still here. Right?
Amen. To tell the story.
Yeah, made it out. Now I forgot what I was talking about.
Because I was asking about Du Nord being caught on fire and how that happened.
Yeah. So, and again, if you want, you have the bones of it, but as far as the foundation and the starting of the foundation, we were in this hotel room, and Chanel had flown up because she's just getting updates from me. And the updates sound pretty dire. And she actually navigated me out of my apartment because I couldn't figure out where I could go to not run into the National Guard, because that's the last thing I wanted to do when I was trying to leave at 2 a.m. in the morning. I'm breaking this curfew, and I don't want to get shot up over it. So she's having to hear this in California, and she was like, this is unacceptable. So she flew to Minnesota. It's like, I need to know what's going on. I need to make sure my husband's actually safe. So we were staying in Bloomington, Minnesota, which is just south of the city. And we were running this operation now with 400 families and all that. We didn't have any time. I was like, we got to get out of here. Like, set this thing up, $30,000, right? Put the limit, GoFundMe, $30,000. By the time we drove from the hotel to the distillery, we'd met the goal.
Oh, whoa.
And it was like, okay, $50,000. $50,000. Like, a couple hours later, we hit $50,000. And to be honest with you, I was getting frustrated with it because she kept coming to me and being like, we hit the goal again. Like, what are we supposed to do? And I was trying to orchestrate this operation.
Get somebody else to do it.
I don't want to talk about a GoFundMe. So I was like, put it at $100,000. Well, then we hit $100,000. I was like, put it at $1 million. And we damn near got there. Right?
Wow.
So we raised all this money. And if we took it personally, then we'd have to pay taxes on it. And so out of necessity, we said, well, let's start a nonprofit so that way the money can go to the nonprofit, so that way 30% of it doesn't end up just getting taken by the federal government. That's why the Du Nord Foundation started. I would love to say that it was because of, this was all part of my grand plan and I was always going to do this. I wasn't, right? But in the time, once we had it, I was like, this makes sense. And it made us think about the future a little bit, because at the time we were just dealing with what's right in front of our face. People needed to get fed. We needed to get some money into these businesses, which we did. We gave out $15,000 grants to 73 different businesses up and down the Lake Street corridor, and in St. Paul, and in North Minneapolis, which is a traditionally black neighborhood. But then the third leg of the stool, and that's what we do today, was a lot of people in our community don't see themselves in the business community. And that's where all that anger got absorbed. So the thesis then, and we stick to it now, is that if we make sure that the community sees themselves in the business community, then the business community, that business community, shouldn't absorb their anger when something like a murder of George Floyd happens, because that's going to happen again.
Unfortunately.
And what can we do? What little slice can we get at? And so that's what we work on today. So now it is about hopefully working with kids. We're working on programs to work with kids to get them to start seeing themselves as business owners at the youngest age possible.
Yes.
And also doing pitch days, so that way people who are just at the beginning, right, just kicking the tires, that they can get a little extra money that might be that boost that they need to get to the point where they can actually open up their own business.
That's so dope. That's so dope.
Again, longer answer than you probably wanted.
No,
but
I knew you were going to have a long answer. That's why I kept that question short.
Yeah.
And I'm happy you expanded. What you guys are doing for other businesses is amazing. And I don't think that people realize the power that they hold and what they can really do. So the fact that you believe in people and you see them and you just want them to see themselves in those spaces and in those rooms, like, that's amazing. So thank you for what you do, because it's overall it's helping the greater good.
And again, I hear that, and I am a member of this team, but I am not the team.
Yes.
And there are people that I get to work with who I don't sit down and think, what's the next step in Chris Montana's grand plan for social justice? It's more that I get to spend time with this group of people that I have the pleasure and the honor, really, of being able to work with. And we can put our heads together and say, well, what do we think is next? So all of those moves along the way, yes, I have a hand in it, and yes, I'm the owner of the business. But there are also other people who are a part of that Denord team who are sitting at that same table with me, and so we are doing it.
Yeah.
I get asked the question.
Yes.
And so usually the fingers point at me. But I am not Denord. I'm one of the guys who works at Denord, though.
Okay. I love that. Thank you for clarifying that. That's very important. So Denord Social Spirits is available on all Delta airline flights. This is major and very cool and very inspiring. Can you share some insight on how that came about and how it's going? And you can give however length of answer you want. We have one more question left.
Well, I'll answer the second part of it first. It's going great.
Okay.
Right. It's going great. How it came to be, there were some folks from the supply chain side of Delta reached out to me and were curious about getting our products on board. They didn't really know which one yet, but they were just curious about getting our products on board. Ironically, it was because there was an article that I was in that I had just bitched and moaned about because I just didn't want to do it. But it put me on some 40 under 40 list.
Oh, okay.
And somebody at Delta saw that and then
Okay.
said, hey, well, maybe we'll hit this guy up and see if...
I love how they reached out to you.
Yeah. And the funny thing about it is that when Delta reached out to me, first of all, they had a hard time reaching me because they're reaching out at a time that we are still very much focused on we call it the Riot Recovery Fund, and in the beginning of the foundation, and running this operation out of the warehouse that was set on fire was the same place that we were running our food and supply bank out of. So we were worried about that. I was worried about my ceiling falling in because all of the water damage and everything. That's where my head was at. It was not in supplying an airline. And also, even the idea of knowing how big Delta is and knowing how small we were, I was like, there's no way. So I said no. Like, they reached out and I said no. And in case there's anybody watching this who's starting up a business, say yes. But probably the dumbest thing that I could have done was to say to this, Fortune 500 company, no, I don't want to work with you. But I didn't see it. My head just wasn't there. And I said no multiple times. And
wow.
And they came back. They kept coming back and saying, well, what if we did this? Or what if we did that? Or maybe we can work with you. Will you just talk with us about it? So eventually I said, yeah, we can talk about it. And so I sit down with them,
This is
and
insane.
talk through all the different issues. Distribution, it's when you work with big companies, they can just make products show up everywhere. Small companies, it's very hard for us to get distribution in a new state. Talked about all these challenges, and their answer was, but what if we worked with you, and what if we could help you make this happen? And I said, all right, that's worth a try. That's how this started. And again, like a lot of the things that have happened with Denord, there's usually some piece in there that has to do with us taking a step towards community in a long-term type of a play that doesn't make money that then pays us back later.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of serendipity, luck, and there isn't much of a grand plan, right? I did not target Delta Airlines. Was targeted by Delta Airlines. Went along, not kicking and screaming, but somewhat reluctantly at the beginning. And once we realized what it could be and that it actually was possible, and committed to making the changes that we would need to make to be able to pull that off, it fundamentally changed the business because it allowed us to this tiny little brand. I mean, they went from working with one of the largest spirits producers in the world to working with one of the smallest. And at the time, our team was 3-4 people. And we're trying to supply Delta Airlines. You're talking about millions of airline bottles. And
wow.
That's another time that we had to basically change the business model and say, we're going to be somebody else. We've got to flip this. The core of Denord's always stayed the same. We've had the same ethos the whole time. But I feel like the actual business changes every 6 months. Right?
6 months, really?
And this was another time. You can ask Aaliyah. Maybe she'd agree with it, right? But it's like every 6 months, it felt like Denord was changing because we were pivoting to whatever was next.
Yeah.
But yeah, they approached us, and we figured it out. We were able to work out how we would bottle all of that. We worked with Brown-Forman to be able to bottle, which was again another company that didn't need to do that for us, because the secret here is that the product that we replaced on Delta was a Brown-Forman product.
Oh, wow.
But their leadership had worked with us following the murder of George Floyd in an effort to try to help out, at that point, the only black distillery. They're like, well, it would be a shame if we lost that black distillery. And so they had started a whole program to do that. And so we had some familiarity with them, and then we went to them and said, listen, we have this opportunity, but we can't handle this on our own. They said, sure. So they helped us replace them. They helped us lose that business. So
this is mind-boggling.
It truly is. And one of the reasons why it's mind-boggling to me, and I won't speak for you as to why, but people don't expect businesses or big businesses to do something good. Not when it doesn't serve them. Delta hasn't been running up and down talking about what they did to help out Denord Social Spirits, right? When I get an opportunity to, I remind people of this, right? Brown-Forman isn't running around talking about what they did to help this tiny little company in Minneapolis, sandwiched between a scrapyard and a railroad line, right? What they did for us that changed our business. But every once in a while, even when the lights aren't showing, people do the right thing, and even from these large businesses. And that, to me, I am a believer in business being a change agent. And my understanding of democracy is that there are 3 things that matter in democracy: the people, the government, and the business community. And whenever 2 of them agree on something, stuff happens. And so if you can get the business community to be a part of the solution, all you need is one of the other 2. And so I look at our interaction with Delta. Yes, it is a success story for us, and it has been good for us, and we have been able to use it as a launch pad to help grow our business. But really, it's a story about big business making the right move when they could have done anything else.
Right.
It would have been much easier for them.
Yeah.
They could have flipped a switch and had a new product on that plane. It took them 1.5 years.
Wow.
To get Denord on.
Wow. That's amazing. So even though you've accomplished so much and your spirits have been awarded best in class and you're making such a huge impact, you've been met with a lot of adversity even through all this stuff. And you explained some of that, but it never seems to like deaden or weaken your commitment or do Nord's commitment, because it's not just you, but your whole team's commitment to the greater cause. Where does that tenacity and motivation come from for you, and what keeps you going?
That's a good question. I very much believe in people, and I have had the good fortune, blessing, whatever you want to call it, in my life to have seen a lot of different groups of people in different spaces. I have been on all the government assistance programs, eating, cheese out of those little cardboard boxes that used to come in, the government cheese. I've gone to all native schools. I've gone to, public schools. I've gone to some private schools. I was adopted at 13 into, a mixed Jewish family. I've seen so many different angles of humanity, and I feel like I've lived a couple different lives. And each group, whether it was the black community, whether it was, wherever I have been plopped in my life, everyone thinks that they are so different, and that what makes their community distinct is so different from everybody else. But from my point of view, they're all the same. Right? There's hardly a difference. So when I see that there are people who are succeeding and people who don't even have a chance, right? I think that if you can see that, if you're aware of it, then you have a duty to do something about it. And I think that I share that kind of commitment with the rest of the team at Nord. I think that when we can see something, it's why we run the company the way that we do, right? Because we've all had bad jobs, and so we want it to be a good job. And so we do what we can so that way that when people are at Nord, they want to be at Nord, that it's a good job, right? And I think that we have a responsibility, I think all businesses have a responsibility, to be perfectly honest with you, to be a part of something good and be a part of something greater than just selling a widget or selling booze. I am not to, this will annoy some people, but there are two things, right, that I kind of layer on top of it for me. One is that we sell alcohol, which is something that people don't need, and it is damaging to a number of lives. And so there is a kind of a karmic cost that comes along with that, right? The second is that we do put out that we are a black-owned business, and that's on our bottles. And I believe, personally, that if you are going to use what is basically a reference to injustice, the fact that the first black-owned distillery doesn't show up until 2013, right? Production distillery doesn't show up until 2013, is really a story about all the people who could have been doing it before but weren't allowed to. So if you're going to market that, if that's going to be part of how you sell yourself, then you are trading in part on that past trauma and pain. And if you're going to do that, if you're going to make dollars from that to put into your own pocket, then you have a responsibility to pay some of that back. And if you don't do that, then you are literally re-exploiting those people that you are putting on your label, saying that you are now representative and exemplar of. So I think that we have a duty that goes beyond any other regular business, because we do talk about being a black-owned distillery, and there are people who are going to go out and support our brand because of that. And if that's the case, there has to be a Nord Foundation. There has to be something other than be happy because, this one black guy, Chris, right, one member of this thing, like, he now has a business that's doing better, right? I don't think that that's fair. So I think that's where a lot of that duty comes from.
That's a lot of food for thought. It's really good. I'm happy that, even though you mentioned some people might not like the answer, I'm happy you shared it, because it was real and it's honest and people need to hear it. And I think other people think like that. I think like that. And just like you said, being on a platform and just being who you are can inspire others. That's inspiring to me. That's inspiring to those who watch this. So thank you for sharing that. I think that is going to wrap it up for us, because that was just, I'm going to have to unpack the things you were talking about.
You got to edit all this down.
I don't know, man. That was good. So, yeah, that wraps it up for this episode, or this portion or segment of Spirit and Soul featuring Du Nord and Chris Montana. If people want to donate to Du Nord Foundation and find you guys on social media, can you give us your profile and website and all those fun things?
Yeah, so dirty little secret, I think I probably haven't made a social media post in like 10 years. But if you go to the Googles and you
put it on the screen.
And you put in yes, right?
It's gonna be,
see it right there
yes.
on the screen. So if you go to the Googles and you look for the Nord Foundation, Du Nord, that's DUNORD Foundation. You'll find us there, and also Du Nord Social Spirits. Right, we're on all of the socials. We have a fantastic team who make sure that we're putting the stuff out.
It's great.
Right. Yeah, so we're there, and if we're not available in your local liquor store, go in and ask them why not.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you, listeners, for listening to another episode of Spirit and Soul. Cheers.